Morning, everyone. Welcome to the weekly meeting. Hope everyone's having a great start to the week. Thanks for the wave, Juan. Just waiting a couple more minutes for people to hop in. Anybody have questions while we wait for a few more people to join the group? While you think of them, today we're going to be talking about a little bit of AAR. For those of you that don't know what that is, I'm sure you all know what it is. After action review, just kind of talking about, let's see who's not muted. All right. After action review for recent transaction, where there is a review of a lot of lessons that I'd learned previously, as well as some new lessons learned, things I didn't know were a thing because of the condition of the property and all that stuff. So I'll go ahead and jump into it. So this property was, I'll just tell you all the story of how it all happened along the way from the very beginning. So as you guys know, there's Facebook groups where you can post about a property for sale, or if you have a client that's selling a property. And so there's groups where you have to be a realtor to be a part of the group, and they'll like look at your license or whatever. Anyways, you get into the group and you can get referrals. So somebody had posted about like a special situation where the seller was doing something called innovation, which is kind of like wholesaling is the easiest way to describe it. And so wave tops of what that is, you can be, so an unlicensed person finds somebody that wants to sell a property. It's like if anybody in here that's unlicensed and like your neighbor wants to sell their property, and then you know somebody that wants to buy that specific type of property or that specific property, you can work out the negotiations with that person, with the seller and the buyer, and be like, hey seller, I can get your property sold for 300,000. Let's say like if they had to go to market, it'd be like 10% more than that, but then there's a lot more fees and all that stuff. And so like, yeah, I don't want to put it on market. I don't want to deal with staging photos or open houses, anything like that. And then so you're like, all right, cool, 300,000. And then you go to the buyer, and the buyer is willing to pay like 350 or maybe more. And so you're like, great, hey buyer, I can get this property to you for 350. But yeah, I'll just be like the middleman. And then you set up with the title company. And so essentially for like a moment in time, you own the property as it's being transferred from the seller to you to the buyer. And then you first setting up that transaction, you get whatever is left after you pay up for the title fees and all that stuff. So it can be, if you look up wholesaling on YouTube, it can be a pretty good way to make money, but does require a lot of either like cold calling, door knocking, sending letters, so similar to a lot of stuff that you do as a realtor, but there's just a little more work needed with the title company and all that stuff, and a lot more just directly reaching out to people. But yeah, so this particular seller was doing something like that. So he was a wholesaler based out of the East Coast and found a property in Hawaii that somebody in the mainland was going to be was in the will for to take over from somebody that was about to pass. And so it was going to be one of those deals, but then it ended up transforming into the wholesaler just buying it from that lady. And all this stuff was kind of complicated, the situation, but it just kind of requires you to have an open mind. And when that the agent that was referring the seller, so kind of bouncing all over the place, but so the way I came in contact with this particular wholesaler was another agent was posting about it, saying, hey, I have this person that needs an agent in Hawaii to help them sell this property. And so that's why I heard about it from her. And so she was referring this person, got in contact with them, and she had specifically said, like, we really need somebody that's open-minded, wants to work hard, and is okay with like figuring things out. And I love doing that. I love problem solving. When somebody says something can't be done, I take that as a challenge to prove them that they're wrong, that it can be done if you apply the work ethic and adaptability, flexibility. And so, yeah, we went to work with that, connected them with a title company that would be able to help them work through that process. Um, and then fast forward a few months later, that wholesaler was now the owner of the property. He ended up using hard money to purchase that property. Is anyone in here familiar with what hard money is?
Mhm.
Anybody want to take a stab at it? If they know generally what it is?
Yeah, I've used hard money before, actually doing some real estate deals. Basically, you get it from a private investor, usually a higher rate of interest and a shorter term for it.
Yep, exactly. So a lot of times, like people that do flips will use hard money. So it's like, let's say there's a house that's so let's use this particular example. So let's say a house for like 250 needs like 50,000 worth of work, and then after that it'll be worth like 350 or 400. And so you go to somebody that has a lot of cash, these hard money lenders. So sometimes it doesn't have to be like an official bank that's like, hey, we do hard money loans. Sometimes it could be, like a relative that you just borrow a bunch of money from. But yes, it's at a higher rate of interest. So typically, I think it's like 10% down or something, and then 1% every month, and usually you pay back the entire amount within 6 months. So the idea is you buy that property that you don't want to, or not aren't really able to get a loan on it because it's not in the best condition. So you buy that property, you do the renovations um, within about 3 months, and then in that like third or fourth month, you're putting it on the market. And so by the time you're at the 6 month, you've sold it, collected your proceeds, all that stuff, and paid back the balance of the loan, and then you walk away with your profit. Um, so yeah, anyways, this guy had used that type of loan to buy this property, and then so the kind of time was taking to get it sold. Yeah, as soon as he took ownership of it, we put it on the market right away, did photos, video, all that stuff. But it was very obvious that it was a project needing a full renovation. Um, it sat on market for a while, got a bunch of lowball offers, which is understandable because like the wallpaper was kind of peeling off. It was livable, but not it looked like a Marine Corps barracks or something like that, just really run down, crusty. And so finally got somebody to put an offer in on it. And it turned out it was one of the buyers that I've been shopping around with. So kind of made things a little bit easier because you can kind of like keep both sides informed, make sure both sides are doing the right thing. And put an offer in, had the appraisal done. Appraiser came out and was like, yeah, this place is not in the best shape. Like, yeah, the buyer's gonna completely renovate it. I think we all are on the same page for that. Um, does her thing, leaves, and then says the property was worth just a little bit below what the buyer had offered for it, which that's a refresher of the Tidewater situation. So, is anyone familiar with what a Tidewater is? So Tidewater notification is when, let's say you're buying a property for 350 and you're on the buy side, and the appraiser says this place is only worth 325. So the bank is only going to lend you what the appraiser says it's worth. And so if it's worth less than that, then that's a situation where there's a gap between the appraised or market value and the purchase price. This was happening a lot back in like 2020, 2021, when people were offering 10% over list price or more, and appraiser comes out, yeah, this place isn't worth what you're offering it, so you're gonna have to negotiate with the seller. And so a lot of times people were putting in appraisal clauses, which says whatever it appraises at, I'm willing to pay an additional 50, 100,000 to make up the difference. Um, but in this case, there wasn't an appraisal clause. So we had that Tidewater notice. and as on the realtor side, it gives the buyer's agent and the seller's agent the opportunity to send in comparable properties that they think will help justify why that property is worth the amount it's being purchased for, so that the buyer doesn't have to come out of pocket to make up the difference. So we did that, and it was no change. But the other thing that happened, and we renegotiated to kind of bring down the price to the appraised value. But the catch that we came across that I hadn't encountered before, because I hadn't really dealt with a property that was of this condition, is the appraiser said the property was C5. And so if you look at, this is the first time I'd ever heard of that, because yeah, I never dealt with a fixer before. I'll drop a link for this Freddie Mac's site, and talks about property condition ratings. And so goes from 1 through 6. So 1 is like brand new, perfect, and then 6 is like tear down. Banks will not lend on it unless it's at least a C4. So some hold like a higher standard and make C3 the minimum, but for the most part, most banks will not lend unless it's at least C4. And you guys can read through the details of that. And so when we found out about that, we're like, oh crap, now we got to figure out how we're going to get this thing to C4. So I had to reach out to the appraiser, ask her, hey, what do we got to do to get this thing to C4? She's like, you got to redo the flooring, got to redo the walls, you got to redo the bathroom, got to update the kitchen, and you got to put either cover up or put window AC in those slots where they're not there. And I was like, so you pretty much got to renovate the whole thing, is what you're saying. It's small unit, and like it's very obvious it was going to be fully renovated once the person buys it. But she basically said you just got to renovate the whole thing. So we were kind of in a tough spot, because it was like, do we put $5,000 to $10,000? Does like the seller put $5,000 to $10,000 to just barely pass? Put, like people say, put lipstick on a pig, so essentially waste that money, and just to get it to pass the C4 or C3, or do we just take the high risk route, get it actually renovated to level like that the buyer wants, and then go forward from there. And then there's also like the timing thing, because every day that would go by, it's costing the seller more money because of the hard money loan. And so after some conversations with the buyers, the seller finally came to the solution of just having it renovated by coming out of the seller's pocket, because you'll probably encounter situations like that where it's like the appraisers, it's happened at least 2 or 3 times to me now, where the appraiser says, oh, there's this house was built before 78, and there's paint peeling, so there's a good chance it's lead-based paint, so the paint that's peeling needs to be painted over before we can close this deal. And it's like there's a section like this big of peeling paint, and so we have to set a day aside to go put some paint on there, even though it's going to be painted later on. And then you have to come back out, and we have to pay you another $150 just to come out and look at the paint and say that it's good. And then you have to submit your report. And so it's like a week of pain in the butt that gets added on just because there's a little bit of peeling paint. Yeah, so we're jogging through all of that, and then finally decided, okay, we're not gonna risk it trying to do a half job just to get it to pass. We're just gonna go ahead and get it done. But I was also mentioning that because if the buyer were to, sometimes the seller is like, absolutely not, I'm not doing anything to this house, I'm done with it, it's yours, to the buyer. Or if you want to cancel, I don't care, you can cancel. So if the buyer then comes over and does repairs, and then something happens and the deal is canceled, then the buyer has put, in the case of paint, not a big deal, like $75 or $25 for a can of paint. But in the case of this particular property, it was going to be like a 25 to 30K renovation. And so if the buyer were to put really any amount of money, it's a pretty high risk of losing that money. But the buyer had negotiated for a good amount of credit, and so what it ended up being was that credit was just going to go towards the renovation that was going to be done in escrow. So found a contractor, got a few bids, all that stuff, got the work done, got the appraiser back out there finally. And then after the appraiser came out, she said it was like night and day difference, obviously, because it was completely transformed. But then she still had she submitted her report to the underwriter, and the underwriter was still asking a couple questions about like the AC in the window or something. So we just had to submit a few pictures for that. And then they, to add a little fun to the story, the day that we got like final approval to close the deal was like the day after the buyer jumped on a ship to go to San Diego. So another learning lesson there, you actually can sign for a house, because that's usually signing the closing documents is like the only time it has to be in person with wet signatures. And so obviously on a ship that would definitely complicate things, but they now have this thing called RON, R-O-N. I'm blanking on what the acronym stands for, but I think it's remote something notarization. And so title officers, escrow officers, attorneys, like people that deal with those types of things, or notaries, they can get certified to do it, and they can just use like this app, or just as long as there's a camera, a microphone, and stable Wi-Fi. As long as you have those three things, you can that notary or that title officer can complete the signing for the documents over the phone or over a computer. So we were about to do that, but then I guess certain lenders don't allow it. So that's the other factor, as long as the lender allows it. And so we had to ask about that. The lender ended up saying no, that they wouldn't allow it. So we had to wait for the buyer to get to San Diego and then set up for signing. And now we're closing tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the owner of that property, and that seller on the East Coast will cash out on the deal, and everyone wins. Any questions on anything I talked about there? Go ahead, Al.
Hey, Zor, how's it going?
Good, are you?
Good. Just for clarification, so did the seller end up fronting that? You may have talked about it, but he ended up fronting that cash for the renovations, and then buyer then just paid more as far as in credit. So say like whatever it costs. Is that what you guys did?
Yeah. So before the appraisal stuff had happened, the buyer was getting like a 30K credit to buy, like to cover closing costs, which would really translate to him having money left over to do the renovations once he closed on it. But since the seller was going to be paying for those renovations, that credit just disappeared, and so now he has a brand new condo instead of having to do the work himself.
So did you guys work it out where the buyer basically chose what he wanted done to the property, and then seller just hired the contractor to do that work? Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. I think somebody else was raising their hand. Is that Ruben?
My question is, right, good afternoon all. So after you did the appraisal reevaluation, so what condition did that property move up to? You said it was a 5.
It moved up to a 3. Yeah.
Did it raise his appraisal value? Or you guys just requested the category to move?
Yeah, it appraised at the full purchase amount after that point. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And so like as you go along through all those things, it's any of those changes, it's just a amendment. So like to change from him getting that credit to the renovations being done and the credit being reduced, it's an amendment to the contract. So you just write up buyer and seller agree to reduce the credit in order to pay for renovations. Another little note on our appraisals and whatnot. So the ROV, has anyone heard of that? Reconsideration of value. So if you're dealing with really is any loan, but I've primarily dealt with VA loans. So if you're buying with the VA loan and the appraiser says it's not worth what you're buying it for, so the title order thing happens, and then you submit your comparables and still comes back at the same price or not high enough to where the buyer doesn't have to come out of pocket, you can still do what's called an ROV,
Hey, buddy.
reconsideration of value. And so when you do that, it really just comes down, like if the buyer really wants the property, it's kind of what the key ingredient is. The buyer has to call the headquarters Department of Veteran Affairs for lending and tell them, hey, I want to buy this place. It appraised at less than what we're buying it for. Seller isn't willing to come down. Can we increase the borrowed amount by 2 or 3% to get it up to where it needs to be? Sorry, that's my contractor walking behind me. Yeah, so, and then if it's a small amount, like 2 to 3% of the purchase price, then it's not a big deal. The Department of the Veteran of VA will make that adjustment to the amount that they're going to be lending, and yeah, continue with business as usual. But that's just something to keep in mind, because you might have a situation where you're representing the buyers and the seller is like, I definitely want some kind of reassurance that if it doesn't appraise at what you're offering for it, that I'm still going to get the full amount that you're offering. And, it might not be a market where people are putting those appraisal clauses in there, and so that's a little tactic you can use and be like, hey, like we commit that they're going to buy it for what they're offering, and if it comes down to it, we'll do the whole ROV process to make it happen. Because a lot of times people don't know about how easy that is to go through the Department of Veteran Affairs to do that. Any questions on that? And then one last thing I'm going to talk about before we wrap it up is just a small technique, easy technique for pulling in clients or prospects. So a prospect is like when you're just you have a name and a number, or a name and an email, and then you're converting them to a lead and then a client. So once you get your KB Core website, and I'll pull up mine real quick just to show you guys. Everyone can see this Google page. So in most cases, your website, you can always change it. I think we talked about this for like your domain name. And so my website is my first name, last name, .exprealty.com. If I wanted to, I could pay like $10 a month for like Hawaii Homes with a Z at the end of it or something like that. Just haven't done that. But so this is my page. And then, so on Facebook, you find somebody, somebody posts like, hey, I'm looking for a rental or a place to buy. And they give like very basic parameters, like the area they want to buy in and price. And so like if they're looking for rentals, you can do that on your website. Here you go to more options and property status, property styles. Where's it at? Hide filters. Yes, right here, this drop down. You just deselect, like if they're looking for rentals, you just deselect everything and then just have rentals selected. So now these are the rentals that are on Oahu. And then if you know what area they're looking to rent in, you can type that in right here. Boom. And then if you know if they say like how many beds or baths, you can put that in as well. Price range, you can throw that in as well. So now you have kind of an updated, let me refine that, apply filters. No matching results. Let me increase the amount. All right, so there's the rentals. So let's say I look at this, I'm like, oh, it seems like a place they might be interested in renting. You click on it, and then this link will be for that particular property. You copy and paste that link, you go back to that comment or that post in the Facebook group, and you drop that in there. You're like, hey, look at this property, it might catch your eye. And then they'll click on it, they'll look through the photos, maybe they'll click on to a different property, and then that's when that little box pops up asking for their contact information. And then that starts the prospect lead conversion process. So just wanted to give you guys that little nugget of information on how you can use this to do some free prospecting. Any questions on that? Sweet. That's all I've got for today. I'll stick around for a few more minutes if anyone has any questions. Aside from that, have a wonderful afternoon and wonderful week. Aloha.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate you.